Hello everyone, I'm Dan Streech, President of Nordhavn. I'd like to thank you for joining us for this live question and answer from the PA Nordhavn home office in Dana Point, California. We know there are people viewing from all over the world, and we hope that you're all safe and healthy. Our thanks to the Australians for getting up so early, and to the Europeans. We hope that you're having a great happy hour. Our thanks to Jim for that introduction piece on the subject of today's webinar, the Nordhavn 41. We have two categories of questions that we'll be addressing in a moment. I have a spreadsheet here with questions that have been submitted over the last couple of days with your registration. Some of them have actually already been answered in Jim's introduction video. And we'll note those and know that they've already been answered, and then address the new ones to get answers to those. The other category of questions will be live questions that you send in now or in the coming through the rest of this webinar. These may be questions that have come up from seeing Jim's introduction, or a follow-up question in the discussion that is about to ensue. Ask them by writing the questions through the GoToMeeting feature, and they will appear right here on my trusty iPad that's right in front of me, and then we'll address them. To use that feature, go to your GoToMeeting control panel and type inside the question box. If you're in full screen mode, you can click on the GoToMeeting icon on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. It looks like an orange flower, and it should pop up, and then you can pose the question, and I'll see it here. So without further ado, let's introduce today's panel. Jim Leishman, PA Nordhavn Vice President and one of the original founders of PAE. Jeff Leishman, Jeff is the Chief of Design at PAE and the designer of all of the nearly 600 Nordhavns that are now in existence. And Drew Leishman, Jeff's son, is the project manager for the Nordhavn 41. Drew will also be operating the computer today, and will call up drawings and photos and other material as needed to answer the questions. So with that said, let's get started with questions. And Jim, I'm going to address this first question to you, and it's about pricing and availability for the Nordhavn 41. And as you answer that, could you be specific to how it would affect Europeans and Australians and Americans and Canadians? Thank you.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned in my introduction, we're doing everything we can to try to keep this pricing as affordable as possible, and getting terrific cooperation from our partners in Turkey, and we all have a common goal. At present, the pricing, we have three separate prices. One is for a West Coast boat, and that would be $740,000. An East Coast boat would be $720,000, and then a European delivery or a Turkey delivery would be $695,000. Now, if we're talking about shipping a boat to Australia or up into Northern Europe, we would take the $695,000 and then we would add a shipping quotation to it. So $695,000 plus the cost of shipping. It would be a modest amount to get it up to England, and a little more to get it out to Australia. But for those shipping quotes, we would quote those separately. And availability, we have not really been pushing the boat much over the last few weeks, but we're getting to a point now where we can and are. That's the webinar is a part of that. But we have number 1 and number 2 are nearing completion. Both boats really are going to be finished completely by the end of this month. Now we're having some challenges with getting the boats down to the harbor and to get them water tested and so forth. But we're hoping that will clear up here in the next 3-4 weeks. This is in regards to the COVID issue, which is going on in Turkey also. Availability, the first 5 boats are spoken for, and actually now number 6, number 8, number 9, number 10, and then we have an order that is being placed and wants some extended timing for number 15. So right now, the first batch of 10 boats, we have really which one is it? Number 7.
Number 7.
Which actually is a contractor number 7. We built it in the number 5 production slot, so it would be called number 5, but built in the number 7 build slot. Now, all 10 of the boats are scheduled to be completed by year end. And we have, we have more orders being placed. So we hope to get production up to, maybe to 15 boats for next year. So we have plenty of availability after number, after number 11. So you just have to check in with us. We really anticipate some orders coming in fairly quickly.
Drew, I want to direct this next question to you. I know in Jim's narrative we talked about the range of the boat. Could you call up on the screen those range graphs again?
Yeah.
Jim, with those graphs up, would you want to address that?
Sure. Well, again, as I mentioned, the predictions that came out of based on the computational fluid dynamics, and then our own calculations done by Phil Arnold using a program called NavCat, are showing really amazingly great numbers. Have you got that up yet? We're looking at the range. So generally speaking, with a world-capable boat, you have to have a minimum range to make the longest passages in a circumnavigation. And actually, that's generally considered to be about 2,500 miles. And that will get you from the West Coast out to the Hawaiian Islands. There's no other passage really in a traditional around-the-world voyage that would require more than that. And our 40 would do that. It had about a 2,500-mile range in the 6-knot range. And of course, much faster. You can run coastal with the boat at a higher rate, but you're going to really reduce the actual range. Now, this boat, I don't know if you can see the range graph there, but it is showing some pretty spectacular numbers. At 6 knots, I think it's showing 8,000 miles or something.
Yeah, on the repack calculation, it's 6 knots. It's about 8,200 miles.
Yeah, which is not going to happen. That we saw that. There's no way. But if we could end up with a little faster speed, like I said, the 40 would make the real long passages at about 6 knots. If you're coming across the Atlantic, you really have about a 1,800-mile trip from the Azores to Bermuda. If you come across a southern route, if you're westbound, you typically come from the Canary Islands to Barbados, and I think that was about 2,000 miles, Jeff, when you guys did it.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking this boat's going to have something well in excess of a 3,000-mile range at faster speed. If we could end up with a 3,000-mile range at 7 or 7.5 knots, that would be spectacular. But we can make these figures available to anybody that wants them, and you can take a look at how phenomenal these predictions are. But we've seen tank testing on models in the past which showed more optimistic predictions, and the real world experience. By the time you get the boat fitted with the fins and the running into head seas and contrary currents and so forth, you're never going to achieve those numbers. But I think the bottom line is our goal is to make this boat a superior boat in terms of range and speed to what we've already done, which is the 40, and I'm confident that we're going to achieve that.
Jeff, this is a question for you. It was a question in the spreadsheet, and also just came into my iPad, and it's comparing our boat to the Green Line 45, which can attain speeds up to 20 knots. And could you explain to us why we are limited, or why we have the speed range that we do, and how our boat, how our 41 would compare to the Green Line 45?
Yeah, sure. I looked at the Green Line 45, the Fly, I think they call it. That's a pure planing hull boat. It's a very lightweight boat. They don't really give you displacement figures on their website. I think it's a concept boat at this point. It hasn't been built yet. But it carries, I think, 100 or 300 gallons of fuel and about 180 gallons of water. So it doesn't really have load carrying capability. So they can probably, on that planing hull with enough horsepower, they can get up to 20 knots. Our boat is a pure full displacement hull. It just can't get up on step, no matter really, I guess if you put 2,000 horsepower in, you might be able to, but that's not realistic. So yeah, we're confined to displacement speeds, and like Jim said, a 7.5 knot, ocean crossing would be more than adequate, and you'd have a range of 2,000 miles, minimum. So the Green Line and the Nordhavn are just two different animals. It's hard to compare.
Yeah, that boat would never have the stability or the strength to safely go and exposed to real open ocean conditions where you can have inclement weather. So the boat that we're building, the 41, it's a ballasted boat. It's got tremendous stability, and it's designed specifically to go wherever a person would want to go. The Green Line would not be suitable for that.
Drew, could you call up on the screen the drawings that show the air draft with the mast down and with the mast up? And then Jim, with that on the screen, could you address or talk to our viewers about the capability of the boat going through the canals of Europe and what we know to be the dimensions, minimum dimensions of bridge clearances, beam, and so forth, and then what the same with the ICW, which we already know that's 65 feet, but the Great Loop numbers and how this boat would be suitable for that.
Well, I'm looking at a picture on the screen now of the boat with the spar folded down. This boat is standard with a beautiful tabernacle, and it would be it's a setup where the spar could be lowered down very easily. Two people could easily do it, and that is going to take the air draft down to 14.4.
14.4.
Which is, all you need to do is get below 19 feet. So this boat would be just ideal for doing the Great Loop. And then as far as the European canals, I am not that familiar with those. I mean, I know that Salvation 2 did a lot of cruising in the European canals, and that had a much higher air draft. They did have to lower their spar, but I think that there would be a lot of area available to you for inland cruising in Europe. Of course, if you're running the Rhine-Danube through the Kiel Canal, large ships do that, so there's no issue with air draft.
And there's a question that has come in from Australia, and I know from whom. Jeff, could you talk to us about whether or not there will be a flybridge and what the dynamics are of that?
Yeah, we'd love to have a flybridge. I know a lot of people like them. But in order to get category A, to ensure we can get category A, CE, we just won't know where our VCG is until we can incline the boat. So once these first batch of boats are done, we'll have all of our numbers, our VCGs confirmed. And if indeed we have a big safety factor and a good margin, we will consider a flybridge. And that flybridge would be a retrofittable to existing boats. But we just won't know for sure until we get our inclining experiments done.
And Jeff, could you elaborate again? So everything that we have right now is theoretical, based on computer modeling and so forth. And when we get the real boat, we do a real physical test. And could you describe what happens there?
Yeah, well, during the design phase, we have a real detailed weight study, and so far our weight study has been very, very accurate. So I'm not anticipating any problems, and I'm thinking we're going to have some good margins. But until we actually put the boat in the water, you just have to wait.
We've been weighing it throughout
production,
we've been weighing, so we know we're on track.
Exactly, so but that doesn't really tell you where your VCG is. We can tell you where the LCG is and the TCG, but that's the transverse vertical centers of gravity and the longitudinal centers of gravity. But the VCG, there's no way to measure that until you can incline the boat. But like I said, the weight of the boat and the centers of the boat so far have been right on target. So I have to assume that the VCG will as well.
So when we get that physical data, we plug that back into the computer programs and it spits out our...
Yeah, once we incline the boat, it'll tell us our exact VCG, and then we can go from there.
A question just come in here on my iPad on what has been the choices of cabin configuration and what seems to be most popular, and what does the first boat have, and and where's the first boat? Where can the first boat be seen?
So start with the first boat. First boat is shipping to East Coast. It's either going to be Florida area or kind of more north. I'm thinking maybe Baltimore had some ships coming in, so it'll be available to see on the East Coast. And I believe that's going to go in a few of the boat shows over there, the Annapolis and Newport shows. I think it's going to be made available for those. It's a 2 stateroom layout. That's actually been the most popular so far. All 5 right now are the double stateroom. I can pull that up here, and it's popular. It's got the room for more people. It's a small family or a couple with a lot of guests cruising around, and that's been the best seller so far.
Even into the orders we're getting in the second batch, we have not seen any single staterooms. It's kind of unfortunate because I think we have a set of interior furniture for some single stateroom boats, but thus far the 2 staterooms have been more popular.
And so that really just parlays into this next question here, iPad question. They're a family of 3, 2 adults and a teenager. And so really on that 2 stateroom boat, the teenager obviously would be in the guest stateroom.
Yeah.
It's ideal for that. This is a stateroom similar to what we had on the 40 with they're nice single bunks. And I'll tell you, on a boat, when you're running a lot, you like a single boat. As a guest aboard this boat, you'd be very, very happy in that guest stateroom. But the 90+% of the time that you're operating the boat, probably you're going to be using that stateroom as a overflow hanging locker space, and you'll utilize it. But the owner's stateroom is very commodious, and you will get a nicer owner's stateroom with the single version, just like we had great popularity with the Nordhavn 35. But thus far, the 2 stateroom has been the layout of choice.
Drew, could you walk us through first of all, give us the headroom dimensions in the engine room, and then and also in the lazarette, and access to both the engine room and the lazarette.
Yeah. So the engine room started at about 5 feet of headroom, and we were happy with that. We figured that's just what it was going to be. And after a couple trips over there, when we got to a point, Jim actually noticed some room to improve on that, and we were able to lower the floor almost a whole foot to give about 5'11", almost 6 feet of standing room.
That's just on the
center line of the engine room, which is where you're going to be working most of the time. So that was really good for us because it's almost full standing engine room. So if we look here on the drawing in the engine room, you can see a ladder here just forward of the engine. And it's going to bring you up into the galley on a nice 2-foot wide hatch on nice gas shocks, real easy to open and close, and that's where you're going to pop out of for the engine room. That brings you back to the commissary area, the similar hatch.
The commissary is a big area that's isolated from the engine room after the engine room.
Yeah, another separate bulkhead separated from the lazarette as well. And that's the same kind of ladder. That's a little less headroom. That's about 4 feet of headroom, so it's kind of hands and knees, but it's comfy. You get your freezer down there, shelving. This is where an optional water maker would go. Even though a water maker is not standard on the 41, it is pre-plumbed with through holes and wiring for easy install if you want a water maker. It's also the combo washer dryer is in this commissary, some more shelving, and the lab is coming in about the same headroom, of 4 feet of headroom.
And that freezer down there, Drew, it's about a 4 cubic foot, kind of to complement the smaller freezer that's in the galley. So the refrigerator or freezer unit in the galley is a combination, but you'd find that smaller freezer down the commissary something that would be really useful for your longer trips. Plus, there's going to be a bunch of shelving and locker space.
Yeah, it'd be great for extra gear, even canned foods, anything. It's sealed off nice and dry. And
yeah, and again, some of these questions were answered in Jim's narrative. There was a question in the pre-question group whether it had wet or dry exhaust, and it is wet exhaust. The engines are heat exchanger cooled.
Yeah, it's just to run dry exhaust up through this, you'd have to allocate space within the interior, and being twin engine, and I think these exhausts are still 3-inch exhausts, just the turbocharging. So you'd have to find places for mufflers, and it was just too much to consider on this boat. So we have a really nicely designed wet exhaust system, a recessed exhaust with flaps on them, and so I think it'll be a real good system.
There was a spreadsheet question here, whether or not we could install solar panels, and subsequently we've learned from your narrative, solar panels are standard on the boat.
Yeah.
There was an iPad question that came in that was doubtful of that particular solar panel, and whether or not they were durable enough.
I saw them at the yard getting unwrapped and installed, and we were walking on them.
Yeah, they're designed to be walked.
They almost look like a non-skid that it's painted on almost.
So that's intentional that you can walk on them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the capacity of them, I think it's under 300 watts.
They're 180 each.
Okay, so that's if you had to leave the boat unattended for a long period of time at anchor, I mean, there'd be enough power there to keep your batteries completely up. Bilge pumps would be could work. I don't know that you could get 24/7 on the refrigeration. The system could be expanded, but this is the standard package, and it's capable of putting out in direct sunlight probably 15 to 18 amps of DC power, which would be very, very nice.
Jeff, I want to direct this question to you. Describe to us what we did with the seating area at the helm, and can a helm seat be fitted, or should it, or what have we done there?
Yeah, we started out with just a traditional helm seat, and based on our experience with the 59, we came to realize that bench seat with the storage underneath it is just it serves such dual function. It's a comfortable seat, obviously to drive the boat from, and as well as just sitting there. You can put your feet up and socialize with the rest of the salon area. It has a beautiful folding up bolster in the front, so when you want to stand at the helm, it gives you real good clearance, and it's a very comfortable seat. It's a custom designed seat by Mina at the factory. She's one of the gals at the factory that did a lot of the interior design, actually.
Hey, Jeff, I just interrupt. You can see in this photo here, that's just the wood foundation for the seat. So there's a beautiful bolster, or a beautiful seat that is installed there, and that bolster. Maybe explain that.
Well, you've probably seen them on regular helm seats where the front of the seat kind of folds up so you can stand there, and it's got a real nice dished out area, so it keeps you nice and secure as you're standing, but it gives you that ability to stand and maneuver the boat. It also, if you want to walk through and go out the door there, it allows easier access for that.
It kind of pops right up.
It pops up.
Yeah.
I don't know what an example we don't have a photograph of one, but I'm sure people
It's a very, very cool seat.
So to answer the question, no, the boat will come with that seat, and I don't think we're going to offer anything else. I think when people see it, they'll realize that that's the best.
And it's going to be adequate for two people.
Yeah, it's a bench seat.
Two-person seat.
Yeah, I remember using that bench seat on 59 when we had the boat out in the Bahamas, and it's fabulous. I really like it.
Plus the expense of those STID helm chairs and stuff, it's pretty hard to swallow.
Pretty shocking, yes. Okay, Jeff, here's a biggie that I'm going to present to you. This is a spreadsheet question that came in, and give us your what you were thinking in your decision process on how this turned out to not be a wide body boat, a double walkway boat. What were you thinking on that?
Well, wide bodies are great. We do it on a lot of our models, are standard with it. But most of our models are raised wheelhouse boats, so aesthetically you can blend that in a lot easier. On this boat, I played with it both ways, and I kept coming back to the boat looking kind of like a houseboat from the port side, with that not having any raised section above it. It just started getting really boxy, and also the fact that it's a one level salon, helm station, galley. You get a lot more feeling of the spaciousness without having to go wide body on the other side. And then in addition to that, the boat will be probably operated 90% of the time with just a couple, and it does allow for much easier line handling. And I don't know, Jim, you have anything to add to that? I just think
Well,
aesthetically it's-
you know, like if you take our Nordhavn 40, the pilot house and galley combination is short by necessity because you have the pilot house forward of that. So you know, it was advantageous to widen it to get enough volume in there to feel comfortable. But with this arrangement, it's the combination of the steering station, you know, it's full length. So you end up feeling like you've got a lot more room in there. So I mean, double walkways is never an argument that that's a nice thing to have, but it was a conscious decision to expand the interior on some of the other models, and it worked out well. We just didn't feel that it was necessary here to do it. That salon is going to feel very spacious, and combine that with the fact that as you're standing there, you can look forward. You have a 360-degree view. It's a lot of nice features. I mean, having operated the 59, and as well as having a boat or a couple boats with this kind of configuration, it's nice. And you just couldn't, if you put a Portuguese bridge in a pilot house, we would have wiped out our, you know, our profile volume. It would have put us, you know, even more of a challenge to try to get this category A. So it was very carefully thought out, and I think when people see it, and particularly when you go operate the boat, it's gonna be a really nice arrangement.
Jim, I'm going to direct this next question. I'm actually going to combine two questions and give them to you. One was a spreadsheet question, and one just on the iPad. I know that during the narrative you presented the ABT track stabilization system that's standard on the boat, and there's a question as to whether or not we considered a seakeeper and or whether or not paravanes in the traditional sense will be available.
Well, we would, I mean, conceptually, the Seakeeper just sounds so fantastic, and we embrace that, and we're really excited about it with our coastal pilot. And ultimately, Seakeeper told us that it probably is not going to work satisfactory, and there's a whole bunch of technical description as to why it won't work very well on a displacement boat or an open ocean boat, which is kind of too much to get into here. But I've kind of ruled that out as not being a reasonable solution to stability. Boats that are getting it are oftentimes getting fins too, and it's just too much to put both systems on the boat. Basically, the fins are incredibly effective. You will never, in running this boat, never feel like the boat is rolling too much. The fins have got so much power, particularly on this boat with the low superstructure and the low vertical center of gravity. It's going to be unbelievably good. The motion you can't really control very well is pitch, and I think this boat's going to be great in terms of pitch motion because of the longer waterline. But paravanes, I mean, we love them. You know, in today's, you know, liability, you know, world where people sue over anything, those are you have a tiger by the tail when you just deploy those. They work fantastic, but it's kind of like being on a sailboat. If you raise a head sail and you got a flogging head sail, a clew could hit somebody in the head and kill them. Well, a paravane, if not handled properly, can come on board and damage the boat or hurt somebody. But it's a great system. They do work good. They don't work, in my opinion, as good as the active fin stabilizers. But there may come a time down the road where we might, you know, embrace that or take another look at it. It would involve redesigning the spar, and you know, we have to put some additional rigging and so forth. But it's not something that we're contemplating right now.
And speaking of contemplating right now, a question just came in on the iPad. As it's soon going to be 20 years since the ATW when we took the 40 around the world, and so the question is whether we would consider that with this boat. And I guess I'll take that question and say that'd be fun, wouldn't it?
We have to find a nice doctor to take along, take care of us.
That's a younger man's sport.
We've got 20 years old. Yeah.
I have a feeling that people are going to recognize the capability of this boat, and if there is a boat that's ever been built that can challenge our world record that still holds today for the fastest circumnavigation of a production powerboat, this boat will do it.
Yeah. Maybe a lady will do it.
Maybe.
Okay. And great questions, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Here, I actually the iPad got away from me here, so I'm going to scroll back down. Oh, okay. So here's a good question. Jim, I think I'll give this one to you. What are we doing about electrical systems on the boat in terms of what we offer to Europeans and or 60 cycle, American folks, or how does the boat behave in areas in which it...
Well, first off, just for a North American boat, a 60 cycle boat, we've stuck with just a 120 volt system. We haven't split the voltage 240, 120, just trying to keep it simple. The DC system is something that I'm proud of. I think it's going to really work well. We have put standard 8 240 amp AGM batteries in 3 separate banks with individual switches for each bank, so you can run all of them at once, which you'd have huge capacity. I think this boat could sit at anchor for 48 hours or so with refrigeration, freezers running. So it's got great holdover capacity, with the inverters. It's a good system, very, very simple, based on a lot of experience that we've had. But to have 8 8D batteries servicing the whole boat, your house loads, your bow thruster, inverters, it's gonna be a really nice system. In terms of the European voltages, this is not I'm not that great on this subject. It will be 230 volt, 50 cycle, and it'll be a separate system. Now, what we would do if someone is going to take a 60 cycle boat and go cruise Europe, a couple things to talk about, and this is almost a deal for Mike Teleria, but I believe the air conditioning system that we're providing will operate in a 50 or 60 cycle environment. Is that correct?
I'd have to double check, but I think that's why we picked that one.
Yeah, and one thing you can definitely do is with a big inverter, you can we could retrofit a 50 cycle battery charger on the boat, which in turn could be plugged in a European environment, or if it was a European boat, it could be plugged in a US environment, which would charge the batteries, and then the boat could be operated off the inverter system for the most part, with a couple of exceptions. Probably even the washer and dryer would probably everything would probably still work. Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I just got a note here from headquarters that we're just about finished. I'm going to, unless someone types in a urgent question here in the next 90 seconds or so, I'm just going to ask one more question here of Drew, and then we'll bring this to a close. Drew, do you have any photos available, or can you show us on the drawing where the water maker could go? I got a couple comments.
Yeah, I can show it on the drawing.
Yeah. Yeah, Jim, I got a couple comments here that looks like people want a water maker. So.
Well, I would too. 300 gallons of water is a lot of water. I actually have a boat with 400 gallons of water, and I have a water maker, a 600 gallon per day water maker, and all I do is just clean the membrane. I just don't use it with local use. So, but I know when I go down to Mexico or go up to the Pacific Northwest, it'll be used and depended upon. So ideally, a boat for local use, I wouldn't even get a water maker initially, because time is the enemy of the membranes and so forth. But certainly the boat needs one, and this boat is going to go so many places that a water maker is going to be essential. And I think, Drew, it's in the commissary.
Yeah, so it'll be the commissary has all this shelving back here, and I believe it's going to be capable to fit anywhere you could squeeze it in back here. This is where all the plumbing comes for it here. The wires are terminated for it.
And like you said earlier, we're providing the
inlet outlet through hole will be pre-plumbed.
Electrical to that location.
And the electrical will be there, so it's almost you pick one off the shelf.
Yeah.
And install it.
And I think we will. We will certainly do that. If someone wants a water maker, we can make arrangements to. We could provide one, and I think we could probably even install it in the factories. It's not a big deal.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring it to a close here. We want to thank you so much for participating with us today. This is our first webinar. We hope that you enjoyed it. We're very excited about this project 41. Very, very excited. This boat is going to go down in history. And thank you for your questions. We hope to do more of these webinars in the coming weeks. This will all be this has been recorded, so this will all show up on our website here when we'll probably clean it up a little bit. I think we got most of the questions done. Some were duplicates and some I skipped because I thought that they were answered in the narrative. But that's it for today. Thank you very much, and goodbye from Dana Point.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.